Speaking of sermons, all right, Alan, next slide. Wesley on money. Don't all run yet. John Wesley, the founder of Methodism 200 years ago, preached a sermon. The title of the sermon was The Use of Money. I imagine when the people came in and they heard the title of today's sermon is The Use of Money, people thought, why did we decide to go to church today? Right? In that sermon, he said that we should earn all we can, that we should save all we can, and that we should give all we can. Over the next 4 weeks, today included, we're going to be talking about earning, saving, giving all that we can. Each week going forward is going to have a different theme around it. We're going to spend 3 weeks on this topic. But this morning, as a way to kind of introduce the subject, we're not talking about earning or saving or giving. We're talking rather about God's economy. Let's see the next slide there, Alan. I want to show you these numbers. 16 of the 38 parables in the Gospels, so 16 of the 38 parables that Jesus shared with people in the Gospels are about money or possessions. One of every 10 verses in the Gospels, so which equals 288 verses, one in every 10 verses in the Gospels are about money. There are 500 verses in the Bible about prayer. There are less than 500 verses in the Bible about faith. There are more than 2,000 verses in the Bible about money. It's fair to say that Jesus was warning his followers and disciples about money. And he wasn't warning them about money because he thought that money was inherently evil. He was warning them about money because he lived life and he went from village to village and he grew up with those people. And what he saw is that people sometimes struggled with all kinds of subjects, and people often struggled with the subject of money. And it led to some poor behavior. It led to some unethical behavior. It led to struggle, lying, cheating, conning others. You know, some things don't change. That still money is a great struggle for a great deal of people. If you don't believe me, go online later today and Google this: lottery winner ruins life. Those 4 words. Lottery winner ruins life. And what you will find is days and days worth of articles about people who have hit it big in the lottery, and soon after their lives just crumbled. And lives around them crumbled. Cheating and lying and attempted murder, and the stories are crazy. That they were like normal people, like doing just fine in life. They played the lottery, they won, and suddenly life was in shambles around them. Now, just so we understand that it's not money that is evil, after you read all of those stories and you become depressed, then go and look up the Giving Pledge. Right, the Giving Pledge is a movement that was started by a couple really wealthy people, Bill and Melinda Gates, 2 of them in the United States, in which they have encouraged really wealthy people worldwide to take a pledge to give their wealth away while they are still living. And the wealth that they're giving away and using is to solve problems like hunger and poverty and lack of education worldwide, and diseases like HIV and AIDS that they believe can be stamped out, doing tremendous work with their money. And so it's not that money is bad, but Jesus understood that it led to some struggles. Now, this sermon series is not an encouragement for you to give us money. We'll do that at another time during the year. I'm not joking either. Though it is a time in which we want to talk about having a healthy relationship with the financial part of our life. In the same way that we talk in the church about having a healthy relationship with our family members, having a healthy relationship with the Bible, having a healthy relationship with our time and our talent and our priorities, having a healthy relationship with prayer, having a healthy relationship with serving others. And so we will talk over this time about earning and saving and giving and having a healthy relationship with this part of our lives. But first this morning, an understanding that gets us to the foundation of our faith, God's economy. Now, Landon read that gospel passage, and there were two parables in that passage, and we're going to walk through those two parables. The first one is about this sower, this man that plants some seeds, and then God does some work, and then the man harvests it. If you're taking notes, write this down. Not in our control. All right? Not in our control. So the man plants the seed, and then it says he would go to sleep and then come back, and he wouldn't do anything to the ground around it. He didn't water it. Now we know, right, if you want the plant to grow, you gotta, some plant food would be helpful, some water would be good, but he doesn't do anything to it. It's as if he's this sort of innocent person standing in the back. He just plants the seed, and then it's like, in his mind, this miracle that this plant just continues to grow and to prosper. And he has nothing to do with it. It is completely out of his control. And then there comes a day in which the plant has yielded the fruit that it's supposed to, and he's then responsible for the harvest. So he's responsible for planting the seed, he's responsible for the harvest, but everything in between is out of his control. Have you ever felt like your finances were out of your control? Right? There's, the car breaks down, the mechanic says, it's only going to be $1,400. Only going to be $1,400, right? You make it home only to discover that the wash machine overflowed and now everything's flooded, and that's only going to be so many dollars. And the kids, their extracurricular activities, that money's due now. Then it's Father's Day, and your dad's awesome, and he deserves like a new set of golf clubs that are really expensive. Right? I mean, do you ever feel like your finances are out of control, out of your control? My guess is we could also share stories about when finances were out of our control, and it wasn't a bad thing, but rather it was a good thing. Some of you have probably been in the situation, I'm sure, in which your last dollar was spent, and you were wondering, how am I going to feed the family the rest of this month? And just at that moment, right, someone showed up with a bag of groceries or some gift that made it possible. Right? Or the bonus check showed up that you didn't think you were getting just at the right moment. Or the refund that you didn't even know you deserved or that was coming back to you, it came just the right moment at just the right amount of time. Or mid-month, you checked the checkbook ledger and you thought, there is no way we're going to make it to the end of the month. And then at the end of the month, you checked it again, and by God, you did make it, and there's more left even so. It is just not in our control. It's as if the man plants the seed because God needs something to work with. That God doesn't just grow the plant out of the ground, that the man has to plant the seed so then God has something to work with. And this is true of multiple different stories in the Gospels, of course. Jesus turns the water into wine. He doesn't make the wine appear. He has something, the water, to work with, and he turns the water into wine. Jesus and his disciples are on the hillside, and he's been teaching the day long, and the people are tired, and it's at the end of the day, and they're hungry, and there's 5,000 or more of them, and they don't know how they're going to feed them all. And then one of the disciples notices that there's a little preteen boy, and that boy brings Jesus his loaves, a couple loaves of bread and a couple fish, and Jesus suddenly has something to work with. And so then he multiplies those loaves and those fishes, and everyone is fed, and there's enough to collect in baskets for people to take home. That a seed is planted. And then God has an opportunity to take over and to take control. But then ultimately, you notice in the story, what happens is that the man who planted the seed is also the man who is responsible for the harvest. The philanthropist who has more money than she or he could ever spend in this life is responsible for what they do with that money, the harvest. The lottery failure who makes a mess of his or her life and everyone around them is responsible for the harvest of the seed that they planted. You know, sometimes people get themselves in a predicament and we want to be witty or cute and we say, well, they're just reaping what they sowed. We're not being witty or cute. We're being biblical. That we are to plant these seeds, to entrust the seeds to God, to trust God to do something with those seeds. And then ultimately, we're responsible for the harvest of what came from that seed. Now, in this economy of God, it doesn't just apply to finances. I know when we say economy, immediately all of us are thinking about finances, but let me draw our mind in a different direction. How about the economy of God as it has to do with grace? You know, the prodigal son got way more grace than he ever deserved. Don't we all? Thanks be to God. The woman only had to touch the hem of his robe to be cured of 12 years of affliction. She just had to touch the hem of his robe. The economy of God. Zacchaeus, who had swindled money from everyone in the crowd, is the one who Jesus discovers and says, I'm coming to your house that I might bring transformation to your life. The economy of God. The outcasts, they didn't have any table of their own, and they weren't ever welcome at anyone else's table until Jesus came on scene, and then they were always welcome at his table. Judas, who had already betrayed Jesus, was even offered the communion meal at that Last Supper. The economy of God. The thief on the cross next to Jesus, who asked for forgiveness, doesn't just get forgiveness, he gets eternity with God the Father. That's the economy of God. It's out of our control. Now, the second parable is about a mustard seed. Mustard seeds are the smallest seeds. I have a little can of mustard seeds here. There's 4,832 seeds in here. Counted them last night. There's a lot. I don't know. Right? They're not very big. There's a lot of them in here. So if you're taking notes, write down these two words. Multiplies, provides. Multiplies, provides. Somehow from this smallest of seed comes a giant plant that God multiplies. I wonder if the seeds that we plant in our lives and other people's lives, entrusted to God, could also be multiplied in that same way. But not if you heard Landon read the parable, God doesn't just multiply for the sake of multiplying, but it's that bush that gives the birds of the air the places where they can rest and be protected and build their nests and raise their young. That the seed that was planted is used by God to provide for others. I wonder if the seeds that we plant can be used by God to provide for others. You know, have you ever had the experience that you befriended someone was in need, and you befriended them and you know, gave them a pat on the back or some small, token of your time or something, and then sometime later, maybe even years later, that friend returned an extraordinary measure of a gift back into your life that you gave just something so small. And sometime later, the return was extraordinary. Have you ever done something for someone that you thought was inconsequential, like anyone would do it, no big deal? But they received it as if it was a grand gesture. Have you ever been on the other end of that transaction, that someone did something for you, and when you thanked them, they said, no big deal, it was nothing. But to you, it meant everything? God multiplies and God provides when we plant these seeds. A woman by the name of Jamie was a matriarch of the first church I ever served. I was 24 years old when the bishop assigned me to pastor this church. And I hadn't even finished seminary yet. I had no clue what I was doing. And the bishop sent me to pastor that church. And so it was a time of deep learning and questioning and high anxiety and everything, trying to figure out, do I belong here? Is this what I should be doing? Do these people welcome me? It was all kinds of questions. Now, Jamie, every Monday, she would go to the day-old bakery. And she found out what kind of Danish I liked. And every Monday, she would buy this Danish. It cost her 99 cents. On her way home from the bakery, she had to pass the parsonage in order to get to her house, and she would put that pastry in a bag, and she would hang it on the front doorknob of the parsonage. It was a good Monday every Monday. That was during the days in which I could eat a whole cheese pastry and lose weight somehow, right? Those days are long gone, right? It was 99 cents. She was going there anyways. She had to drive by the parsonage on her way home. She didn't get out. She made her husband get out and hang it on the door anyways. It was nothing to her. It was everything to me, right? Because every Monday it meant the matriarch, right? The one in this church, right? I'm welcome. I'm wanted. The work is good. I'm where God wants me to be. It was everything. Now, this is also the woman who fostered 30 babies in Los Angeles County who were born addicted to drugs and immediately taken away from their mothers. Some of the babies she had for a night. Some of them, one of them, she had it was like 6 or 7 years. Most of them, it was a week, 2 weeks, maybe a month. Just a flash, until they found some other appropriate place for this child to go. Now, what she would say is, I just had these kids, it was a moment, it was a night, it was just a week. But if you went to any celebrations at her house, there were always all kinds of people there, all different shades and parts of life, that they all called her grandma. When you went into her house, from floor to ceiling, one wall to another, a wall was just filled with pictures. High school graduations and college graduations and commissioning into the military and baptisms and babies born and weddings. There were all of these kids that she had. Now, what she said, what she would say is, I just had them for a moment. It was, she would say, I had that kid for a night. That's it. It was one night. And then other people took over and raised that kid into who he or she was. But all of those kids would say, she saved us, right? This small gift that she understood was an extraordinary gift. This small seed that she planted was received as this extraordinary gift that God had multiplied and provided. From just a couple loaves and a few fish, Jesus feeds thousands. There were 12 guys that Jesus said, come and follow me and I'll teach you to fish for men. And it created a movement that would change the course of human history. The next 3 weeks, we're going to be talking about this part of our lives together. We're going to consider what seeds we have. We're going to consider how is it that we can get some more seeds. We're going to consider where is the best place to store or share these seeds that we have. We're going to hopefully come to understand better that we are not in control, rather God is. that God has the ability to multiply what we are willing to give, and that it is okay for us to trust that God will provide. To Jesus, this was the single most subject that he talked about the most. In the church today, this is the single most subject that we talk about the least. It's uncomfortable. We're not sure what to do with it. I hope over these next few weeks that we all listen deeply and that we might learn something of God together. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.